for over 2 decades now. So we have a range of accountability experiments, and what we do when we have our research hat on is to try and analyze these different accountability experiments to try and understand what works in what context, what are the impacts and effects of these different experiments, and how do they add up to creating an environment for open government. So these are two main things that we do.
Can you talk a bit about the OGP grant challenges and which challenge relates to your work and some concrete examples?
Sure. I think there are two key parts to how we address the OGP grant challenge when we put on our practitioner's hat. First, we focus on trying to increase budget transparency because we believe very strongly that unless people know how money flows through the system, how resources are allocated, and how they get spent, it's very difficult for both citizens and government alike, frankly, to monitor and direct services and to demand accountability. So we work on developing tools that are easy to use, that are simple, that are scalable and replicable to collect data on how money flows through the system. The bulk of our work at the moment is on elementary education, which is one of the most important MDG challenges in India and across the world. We try and the government of India has been putting large sums of money in elementary education. We now have a Right to Education Act, which is going to increase the amount of resources that are going to go into elementary education. So we're trying to track the way in which money flows right from the government of India all the way down to schools in India, with a view to try and encourage parents to start participating in understanding this, where this money is coming from and what it ought to be used for, and making plans so that schools can function better. So that's the sort of core. So we really are looking at not just budget transparency, but budget transparency with the purpose of getting citizens involved to engage in how to monitor service delivery.
It must be difficult to get people really excited about budget monitoring. How do you, particularly some of the people who are most vulnerable have a lot of other things that they need to worry about.
Sure,
how do you help convince people that this is an initiative that they should be participating in?
Frankly, it's one of our biggest challenges, we have to spend a lot of time working with people, trying to make them understand that it's their money. People have a sort of abstract notion that government money is government money. It comes from somewhere. But to try and whittle it down to an understanding that money actually comes from your pocket, it comes from the mobile phone that you buy, it comes from the mobile telephone call that you make, it comes from the medicines that you buy. Getting people to start understanding that is critical. And to do that, it's really important to break down complex government budgets into easy, tangible, relevant pieces of information. So I am really interested in money that relates to my school. I'm not necessarily so interested in money that comes to my government, or how government is sort of choosing to take public finance decisions to allocate these monies in different ways. So identifying the nerve center of these pieces of information, identifying the core information that is most relevant to people at the level at which they need to know it is the primary way in which we can get people to start engaging.
It seems like in a lot of countries, particularly countries with high levels of corruption, that there's a feeling as citizens that government's never going to change, they're never going to do anything differently anyway. How do you help people to feel empowered that what they're doing can actually make a difference in a place where there's a lot of dissatisfaction or where there isn't a lot of confidence?
Sure. That is one of our big challenges. But I think India, and most of our work is in India, so I can only speak to what we do there. India is going through a very interesting moment of transition where people's aspirations are increasing on a daily basis, and therefore people's expectations of government are also increasing. And we're just out of a massive mobilization of the Indian middle class fighting against corruption. So people are getting fed up and are finding ways to articulate their voice. So in that sense, it's quite a moment to be able to try and leverage this sense of aspiration, this sense of expectation, and sense of being totally fed up and frustrated to be able to try and move to the next level. Of course, I think it depends on the kinds of issues you work on. I think it's sometimes easier to mobilize people when it comes to very concrete, tangible things like your wages or like a public asset. It's a little harder to mobilize people on, say, elementary education because, a parent thinks, I've done my duty by sending my child to school, and do I have to spend the next 12 odd years monitoring how the child performs in school when that's the teacher's responsibility? So it's sort of leveraging a moment and trying to encourage people to really understand that you can only go to the next level if you start engaging actively with the system is extremely important, and it's one of our biggest challenges.
One of the things people talk a lot about what are government's responsibilities in making information available and government's responsibilities in engaging citizens. What do you feel like are civil society and citizens' responsibilities in being good partners in an open government project?
Oh, absolutely. I think civil society, organized civil society, and citizens play the key role. Putting information out there is only the first step. Being able to access that information, leverage that information to demand accountability, to demand to move to the next level is key, and that needs to be facilitated by civil society and by responsible citizens who actually look at this data. I mean, I find in our work, especially when we look at budget data that government puts out, which it's complicated, it's difficult. Every time you log on to a website, you deal with numbers that give you at least 3 more gray hair, and it's important to get people to start engaging and interacting with that data, because if they don't, then government can sit back and say, well, we've done our job by putting things out, and if no one else is going to come and use it, that's not really our problem. So as government sort of willingly starts opening up, citizens have a responsibility to start engaging with that information, and civil society or sort of organized civil society, I would say, plays a really important role in acting as the facilitator, as the conduit between this increased information and creating spaces and methods by which citizens can start interacting with it and taking it to the next level. So they play the key role, I would say.
Tell me a story about an instance where citizen involvement in monitoring of government services has made a difference.
In India, we have tons of stories. I mean, we have a right to information law entirely because a citizens group in a local area started a movement that eventually led to a law. I think the most interesting sign of impact comes from the fact that about 5 years ago, government functioned in a very, very opaque way. That's opened up. We now have big corruption scandals that are coming out in the public domain because government can't function in opacity anymore. That's a sign of impact. In the last year or two, almost every bureaucrat you meet will at least pay lip service to the idea of transparency and accountability. They may go back and do something completely different, but it's become part of government vocabulary and part of government nomenclature, which is an important first step. And the challenge now is to leverage this moment to really make people understand that accountability and transparency means more than just putting information in the public domain, but identifying relevant information, getting people to use it, and responding to demands that come from citizens. So,
right. Any other thoughts or advice that you would have for people who are beginning to get into open government and beginning to get into citizen oversight and accountability?
I think two things. One, that identifying relevant information is the key. It's very easy to put out information, and it's very easy, especially in the age of technology, to end up with an information overload. So really trying to understand what are the key pieces of information that are most relevant to the day-to-day lives of people is critical, and also recognizing that engaging with government data does not require technocrats. I mean, we've been collecting complex budget data through surveys that we do both nationally and sometimes in smaller, more rigorous. We do more rigorous surveys in smaller sample areas. We have ordinary citizen volunteers. Some of them have barely got undergraduate degrees. We spend 3 days training them up, and then they go out and collect this information. So it's actually, you don't need to be a PhD to try and deal with government data. You need to be willing, you need to be open, you need to have the passion and the desire, and you can do a lot. So.
Great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.